Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange Podcast. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you raise the bar on your own excellence, to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's podcast. Greetings, it's Hugh Ballou, and welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. This is a series of interviews we've been conducting for 6.5 years. And we've had some really, really interesting guests over the years, and today is no exception. We've got Ryan Frederick, and Ryan is the author of a really neat book. I've not seen anything like this, Ryan. So I'm going to let you talk about your topic and introduce yourself. So Ryan Frederick, tell people a little bit about who you are and what makes you tick, and what is your passion for this founders thing that you talk about?
Yeah, Hugh, thank you. And thanks for having me and the opportunity to chat with you and to get in front of the people that are watching and the people that ultimately will listen to the podcast. I never had any intention of being an entrepreneur and trying to build products and to start companies, and I think that's true for most of us that end up wearing the founder label and going down an entrepreneurial path. And I think, what I'm most interested in around it is that it's not what most people think that it is. And most people glamorize it and think that, it's a path to riches, which, it potentially can be. But I just, have a strong, passion now and interest in helping people really understand what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What does it mean to be a founder? What's the realities of the situation? And why are we not really wired to do it very successfully and very well without a lot of consideration and a lot of work to understand what the principles are around it and how to increase the odds of success and to make it a little bit more of a palatable journey.
So why do you do this?
Yeah, I think it's because I see a lot of like, one of the things I write about in the book is there's this hustle sort of mantra narrative out there right now, which I don't think is very beneficial. I think that we should hustle. We should be intentional. We should work hard at things that we're interested in and to serve, to people and solve problems. But hustle for the sake of hustle and this hustle narrative and mantra that's out there is actually, I think, pretty misguided and destructive. And so I see a lot of things happening around being founders and entrepreneurship that I think are just, are off base and don't give people the real story and the real picture of what it's like.
So it's hard to, there's assets and liabilities, benefits and liabilities to founding any kind of organization. And so there's people, I'm a founder and president of Center Vision Leadership Foundation. And I've known people who have been a founder that it's all about them and they can't let go of it. So it's not something that they can replicate or somebody else can run. So how does that play into what you're teaching?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I think a lot of people think that being a founder and being an entrepreneur is and should be a very ego-driven endeavor. Right. And there is some level of ego as part of it, for sure. You have to believe and you have to have some conviction and confidence that you can solve a problem in a way that customers are going to care about and are going to value. So you have to believe that you're capable of delivering value to people. But if it becomes about you, and if you're not operating in the best interest of your customers or your team and the product and the company, and if you don't put a set of stakeholders above your own interest and above yourself, then it's probably not going to work out the way that you want it to. Because it turns out entrepreneurship is actually not an ego-driven endeavor to success. It is really more of an empathetic sort of servant path to success, because if you operate in your own best interests, then you are not going to be received as others in the way that you want to be received for your company to actually grow and be successful. And that's a hard thing for people to sort of wrap their heads around, because being a founder and the startups that we all hear about and the big successes, from the Facebooks to the Amazons to the Microsofts, to the Dells and on down the list, right? The people that get all the press and get all the notoriety are, the founders. And, they take big risks and there's, it's warranted in some cases. But that's not why those companies became successful, right? And Bill Gates and a bunch of the other people in that circle, he solved the problem in a way that a lot of people cared about and a lot of people valued and would pay for. And now through his work, through his foundation, he's showing that the wealth that he accumulated, right? He's distributing a lot of it. And I think that there's just a very egocentric perspective around being a founder, being an entrepreneur that is just off base, and it's probably not going to serve people well if they're a very ego-driven, egocentric founder, and they're probably not going to have the outcomes that they want, personally or professionally.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It boils down to leadership, and really nothing happens without the right leadership. And I work with a lot of startups, and I have over the last 32 years. And just because somebody's got a great idea or great skill or great product or great service, and they want to found, we're talking to what I would classify as social entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. They're leading a cause-based charity, leading a membership organization, leading a ministry. But they're doing something that is really critical for people's lives. But they've got the idea, the methodology, or maybe the discipline of what they're doing. They're a content specialist. Because you study theology doesn't mean you can run a church. Because you've got a great product doesn't mean you can build a service around it. So there's a big gap in the ability to lead this. So we're speaking to nonprofit leaders and clergy, and we are innovators, we are creators, we are social entrepreneurs. So what you're saying is really in line with what we teach here at Center Vision, is embrace good, sound business principles, because you're actually running a tax-exempt business. And so anything that, so there's, I remember when I was young reading about J.C. Penney getting ousted from his own board of the company he founded. And on the other hand, I have a friend that lives here in Lynchburg, Virginia, that founded a worldwide charity that feeds people. It was called Stop Hunger Now when it was founded, but it's now been rebranded Rise Against Hunger. And they're all over the world. And he just goes in for special presentations to donors or special programs he's called in. But basically, it's been replicated and run by people who have the ability to run. But he had the vision, launched it, and grew it to be a very substantial organization. But to his credit, he was able to create a succession plan, so it's going to exist long after he's gone. I don't think many founders know how to do that.
Well, one of the key, and I agree with you, and I think whether you're talking about starting a for-profit, company that intends to scale rapidly and become a big enterprise, or a social enterprise, or a nonprofit, I don't think that the founder journey and principles are all that different, because it is incredibly hard to create something that doesn't exist and to make it viable and sustainable. So are there different challenges to making something super scalable and large versus something that remains small and remains a small business? Of course, but getting it off the ground, I think that there's lots of similarities. And I think that one of the challenges that many founders face that many fall sort of prey to is you have to quickly shift from being a founder to expecting that you're a good operator of yourself, that you can shift from, oh, I'm the one that, that had this idea, or I'm the one that discovered the problem, and I'm the one that took the risk to start the company, and I'm the one that put capital into it. Well, all of those were personal choices and decisions that nobody forced you to make and nobody forced you to do. So you don't get a medal and you don't get a badge of honor, right, for being a founder and for taking those risks. And so you have to quickly migrate from that sort of perspective and mentality and patting yourself on the back to being a good operator of a business. The best founders quickly become good operators, right, and good business people. The worst founders never get out of the space of, thinking that somehow they're the cat's meow and they're a special snowflake because they're a founder. There's no glory in that. The glory is becoming a good operator and solving a problem that people value and hiring people and having a team of people that can now apply their craft inside of this wrapper that we call companies, et cetera. But many founders, don't ever make the transition from being founder to being a good operator, and many get tripped up there. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? I mean, look, there are complications when you bring on investors into a business. And sometimes that means that founders end up not even operating companies that they started, right? Because they get diluted over time. Their say and their impact and their input gets diluted over time. They may have a smaller voice on the board. And another reason that founders often get unplugged from the companies that they founded, though, is not just money things and strategy things, et cetera. It is because they don't make this transition to being a good operator. And so there also is a point where a founder has to realize, are they able to make the transition to being a good operator, or are they more of an initiator and a catalyst that can identify a problem and that can build an initial product to solve that problem, but they're not the ones to run an ongoing enterprise, right, and company around it. And, that's a very conscious decision that a founder and a founding team has to make. And if they don't make it, then the board or investors or other people might make that choice for them if the board doesn't think that they can evolve or aren't evolving into being a good operator.
Now, the parallel in a nonprofit, we don't have people that dilute our shares because there are no shares, but there are investors, and they invest in by donating and with their time and their talent and their money. But the same dynamic can happen if you're not competent. They're going to ask you to leave. And many founders can and do become a detriment to the organization. And that happens often in some arts groups, where somebody that's competent in one of the performance arts and they start a nonprofit, but they're not really competent in both directing the music or the play and running the organization. So I encourage a lot of people that found organizations to have an operations person, because you can still be the visionary for this project that you started, but you really need somebody that's got the boots on the ground tactical sense. So the visionary skills and the tactical skills not always reside in the same person. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's why most investors in startups don't invest in single founder startups anymore. They invest in founding teams, because they know that it takes more than one person, right, to be able to pull off something of consequence and something that ultimately is going to have some long-term sustainability. I think that nonprofits are not that different than startups, especially new ones, because you've got to go out and you've got to raise money, right? The money and the funds come through different vehicles. They often come, from grants, and they come, through, in some cases, foundations, and sometimes they come through corporate philanthropic operations. But the act of fundraising for a nonprofit and the act of a startup raising investment capital are not are not that distant, because it really is about storytelling, and it's about, can you create a new reality in the head of the funder or the investor that they can buy into, because it's believable, and because you connect the dots well, and because you establish who the antagonist is and who the protagonist is, i.e. you and your product and your approach and your organization. And then can you motivate them to action? And the process of telling the story and getting good at it and being effective at it, I think is very similar for founders of for-profit startups and people who are starting nonprofits.
It is. It's really identical in many ways. You have two professional fundraisers in the queue watching you today. And so we'll get them in here to ask some questions in a little bit. But it's in your narrative about your book, there's a couple of things that got my attention. Many aspects of becoming a founder. Founders have to run to the fire, not away from it. So you have to face off these hard things. And really, I see a lot of people wanting to start some sort of venture, some sort of enterprise. And I would guess out of 100 people that have an idea, only 3 are going to do something about it. And only one of those is going to succeed. So the statistics are pretty grim, and the challenges are pretty high. And funding an early stage business, where you say you've got an invention, you want to get it in the market, that's a hard sell. If you've got a project, you want to feed hungry people, let's just pick one, and you want to start a project, very often people don't look around to see what else is there. Are you duplicating, and could you join another effort? And then they don't really have that storytelling ability to talk about, why are we doing this, and what's going to be the result of our work? So we approach it. I guess entrepreneurs are like all alike in a way that we have this fantasy, which is why we're entrepreneurs. We have this fantasy brain. We can envision the future, but there's a big gap between what we envision and making it happen. So it's really getting the heads out of the cloud, and it's really developing the skill set. So the one is, I would like you to talk about run toward the fire. And, it's still the same issues with people doing a startup for a nonprofit, because everybody is going to challenge you. And people who have money because they've taken care to attract it, and they're not just going to hand it over to you if you don't show up as competent. And then and scale doesn't matter until a small number of people love what you're doing. And I think the early money is what I call love money. They love you or love your project, but you still got to show up and be sincere and at least look competent and have some sort of quantifiable plan in your pocket that you can share with them. So talked about the fire thing and the rest of that.
Yeah, I think, by very definition, I think being an entrepreneur is being a problem solver.
Yes.
Because you are trying to solve a problem in a way that someone cares enough and values enough that they're going to pay for it. So now you can have a commercially viable business, right, solving that problem. But then I think it evolves to now, as you talk about being a good operator and executing, there is an unending series of problems, right? That every leader faces and every business faces and every organization faces, including nonprofits. And we're not really wired to, as I put it, run to the fire. And the interpretation, there is to run toward problems, right? Where we are wired for safety and security and protection and comfort and all of those things. And if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur and start a company or organization that is going to succeed and that is going to provide some impact and some value to the constituents that you're serving, you have to be willing to, and you have to develop the mindset that you are going to run toward problems. You're not going to shy away from them, and you're not going to run away from them. But too many people are not wired that way, and they're not trained that way, right? Because if you think about, the hierarchy and nature and nurture, our parents protect us from problems, and then we try to create environments and lives for ourselves that are high on comfort and low on discomfort, which often means that we are not that skilled and we are not that adept at problem solving. And when a problem appears, confronting it head on. Yet, I think if you're going to start a successful company or organization, you had better be wired and you better develop the discipline and the muscle to deal with problems and confront them head on, and not think that they're going to go away or that somehow someone else is going to come and save the day and solve the problem for you.
Yeah, that's actually worse with clergy and nonprofit leaders, because we've got this fantasy world that we're doing something worthy and people are just going to put money in our pocket and everybody's going to be happy. And as a profession, clergy avoid conflict primarily, which makes it escalate. And so we're not given the skill set to say, okay, approach the conflict, move toward it calmly and openly, and just speak to the facts and engage people. And pretty much we've inherited some broken systems, and we've been taught leadership wrong in the nonprofit sector because we function at a low level. And I used to have a lot of clients early on that were in crisis, and I would do crisis intervention or conflict management. And because you never solve it, conflict is really energy. So we have to learn how to move toward it, like you say. And we're doing something that people don't understand on the level that we do, because it's our baby and it's our concept. So part of this, I would think, is sticking with it. You know, how many people give up? You know, the story out of Think and Grow Rich, the guy that bought the gold mine and gave up, sold it, and the other guy that bought it dug 3 feet and had the mother lode. And so people give up just before they're going to succeed. So that's a factor too, is the ability to stay with it.
Yeah, and I don't think, as part of confronting problems head on, I don't advise anybody go seek out a fight and go seek out confrontation. But I also don't think that you can avoid confrontation, right? And I think that we often view confrontation as negative and somehow bad, and we're a bad person, right? If we sort of stand our ground or make our case, and I think that if you are well intentioned, and if you believe in what you're trying to accomplish, then you should fight for it. And I think that being willing to fight for something and dealing with the problems associated to it, I don't view as negative in any way. I think you're acting responsibly, right, to the mission and the objective and to your stakeholders. And I think that there's just been we've developed a negative connotation around confrontation that is I think unwarranted and doesn't serve many people well who are trying to bring new things to bear, because you're gonna break some eggs through the process of making an omelet, and there's going to be some people that you probably don't make happy through the process, and there's some people that probably view you as competition, and they're going to get a smaller piece of the pie now that you have access to the pie, and all of these other analogies. But I think that's also healthy, because I think in the end it makes everybody better and helps everybody improve. So I just think that there's a really delicate balance between being a nice person and a good person, and being a person that's effective in a professional business context. And we had at the product firm that I'm now a principal in, we had a situation where I had to jump in as part of it to help solve this problem. And one of my partners, I've got 2 partners in the firm, and one of them said to me, "You're really good at not shying away from things, but also going into things very even keeled and very measured." And my comment to him was, I'm never looking for a fight, but if you bring a fight to my door, I'm sure going to be ready to fight. And I think that in my experience with nonprofits, sometimes, and I think this emboldens your comment, I think sometimes nonprofits shy away from fighting for what they know is right and what they believe in and what's going to make their organization better and what's going to drive more impact and going to drive outcomes, et cetera. And I just think that the nonprofit doesn't have to equal we're just gonna give in and we're not gonna fight for what we believe in. And I think there maybe needs to be a little bit more, I don't know if aggression is the right term, but I think at least a little bit more fight in some nonprofits.
I think assertive would be a little less than aggressive. So nobody, I used to talk to potential clients, said, I'm going to come and work on team execution. And they got really excited because they thought that we're going to get to shoot people.
That's a good one. I'll have to use that. I might steal that.
I just made it up. So,
Okay.
I went from being a consultant to being an insultant, and then to a resultant. Technically, to support your point, confront is with your front. It's neither positive or negative. It's showing up in an engaging manner. And part of a leader is you got to do things that other people aren't willing to do. And that is to confront, and there's going to be conflict. It's like I said before, it's a sign of energy. And part of it is what we set up ourselves because we're not really clear with our story. We're not really clear with our vision. We're not really clear defining the outcomes. So,
and I can guarantee you that if you don't run to the fire and if you don't confront problems head on, those fires that start out as little embers are going to become infernos. And then you're going to have a conflict and a confrontation that could have been much easier to deal with than if you had just run to the problem initially.
Amen. And it grows nuclear, just a little misunderstanding. Well, people get divorced over little things because they didn't fix what was precipitous of that moment. So you also say that a lot of this is counterintuitive. So what in the world do you mean by that? I mean, you just think of something, you do it, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like golf, right? That it doesn't make any sense to hit down for the ball to go up, right? And that's one of the reasons that golf is so challenging, because it's both physically and mentally counterintuitive. I think being a founder is the much of the same, because when you think about the process of starting something and creating something, we think that the way that it appears on the surface is the way that it is. And the reason that the best golfers in the world are the best golfers in the world is because they have figured out and developed skill and knowledge and expertise around the counterintuitive nature of golf, that allows them to be the best in the world. Otherwise, anybody who picks up a golf club, could compete with them at their level. And so one of the things that I think is really counterintuitive around building a new product and creating a new company is we often go seek validation for the problem that we're trying to solve and our solution to the problem in a positive light. So we will go ask potential customers and users, and in the nonprofit space, it might be potential people that the nonprofit would serve. It might be potential funders, et cetera. We go to them and we ask them for validation in a positive connotation. So we ask them things like, what do you like about it? And how will you value this? And how important will this be to you? And how will this change your life? Right. And no one wants to give negative feedback to someone who's trying to create something and trying to do something new. So we get a lot of false positives, yes, right? As part of that initial validation. The way we should be framing that initial early validation, and it should happen throughout, but it's mostly centered up at the beginning, is tell me what you don't like about what we're doing. Tell me about why you wouldn't use it. Tell me about why you wouldn't fund it. Tell me how this wouldn't add any value for you. Tell me why, this doesn't matter to you. And, tell me why we should stop working on this. And if you frame your early validation in the negative and you allow people to be transparent and authentic and honest with you, they will give you the legitimate responses that you're looking for. You might not like them initially, but it's going to be honest. And then you can make decisions based upon those real responses versus the false positives that you get if you frame the validation just in the positive. Does that make sense?
As long as you're not asking your spouse or your mother.
Correct. You should be asking, people that are independent of whether it succeeds or not.
I'm going to ask some of our viewers to weigh in with some comments and questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, totally.
Before I do that, I want to do a sponsor moment, but I also want to ask you. So anybody could be a founder, right? Anybody has an idea, so everybody could be a founder. Is that right?
Yep. Anybody can label themselves a founder. Anybody can change their LinkedIn headline to say that they're a founder. That part of it is completely irrelevant. But
you also say in your narrative, not everybody should be a founder.
Yeah, most people shouldn't. As you sort of mentioned some and reference some stats about the number of people that actually should do something. This isn't scientific. This is just my sort of, Kentucky windage. I think something like less than 2% of the population probably should be entrepreneurs and founders. And I think it's mostly because people they think it's different than what it is. And they think it's going to be easier than what it is. And they are not wired to do it and to handle the realities of what it is. And so I think that most people shouldn't do it. And I think that to some degree we do a disservice to people talking about, well, anybody can be an entrepreneur and everybody should be an entrepreneur, et cetera. Well, that's like saying everybody should be a firefighter or everybody should be, a heart surgeon, right? It doesn't mean that everybody should be one. And I don't think that just because anybody can call themselves a founder or an entrepreneur, do they have the makeup or the potential or ultimately the skills to do it effectively and to do it well? Yeah. And some people have the ability to run money away, rather than attract it, to distract it. So let me talk about our sponsor. It's going to be our own leadership community. CenterVision Leadership Foundation, centervisionleadership.org is a website. Underneath the website is this community of people who have all the ideas and they want to raise the bar on their skill set, but they also want to network with others. It's really lonely running a nonprofit. And we're starting a track in the community for community builders to help you connect with other thought leaders, to give you a track to go by. You got an idea, you want to start something. Let's vet it. Let's make sure you got the skills. Let's make sure you have the team around you and make sure you got your story and your plan in place. So the place to do that and to gather with peers and have a safe space to talk is CenterVision, the community. You can go to nonprofitcommunity.org, nonprofitcommunity.org, and check it out. There's just some really good stuff there. And we want you to be there and to network with others who are passionate about solving problems, bringing value to humankind. That's what I learned from Bob Hopkins, who wrote this book, Philanthropy Misunderstood, about some great philanthropists. And I learned from Bob that it's more than money. So we have a number of people. I see we got one for Mark. Bob is in Dallas. Mark, you're in Peru. Ahmed, you're in Bedford, Virginia, and Jeffrey, you're in Richmond, Virginia. So Bob, since I mentioned your name, do you have a comment or a question for our guest today?
Yeah, thank you very much. Ryan, what is the name of your book?
It's called The Founder's Manual.
Okay, well, that's pretty easy. Where do you find it?
It's on Amazon and it's on the publisher's site. If you go to thefoundersmanual.com, then there's links out to Amazon and to the publisher's site.
Great. Well, I founded a magazine at one time, and I wish I had read your book first and maybe had some other courses, because I kind of flew by the seat of my pants. I think that's a phrase. I was told by many, though, it's a good thing I didn't know anything, because I broke all the rules and it seemed to work. So I don't know if you have any relationship about that or not. Sometimes you get over educated about the topic and you get scared to try new things because you're told that you need to stay within this box. And if you shouldn't be a founder unless you do this, 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 and this. And those people who find things and are successful at it sometimes don't have any information whatsoever. They just go with their intuition, as you mentioned. Can you comment about knowing what you're doing as opposed to not?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of that. I think is the best recipe, and I think that there's lots of as there is with any topic now. There's lots of content around being a founder and starting companies, and I think some of it's good, and I think some of it's not so good, and I think it can be very confusing for people. And I think one of the things that we are challenged with right now is, we're trying to figure out, well, how do we educate entrepreneurs, and how do we train people to be entrepreneurs, right? And there are, entrepreneurship majors now at colleges and universities, and then there are accelerators that are trying to take these very early stage companies into their accelerator and have them come out, more mature and higher potential companies. And I don't know that any of that is going to prove, very worthwhile and very effective, because I still think that entrepreneurship is still a very individual, and even if it's a team of 2 or 3 people starting, an endeavor, I still think it's a very individual effort of a very small group of people that remain very intentional and disciplined through the process, who just keep figuring it out. A friend of mine that started a company, he's famous for saying, every day I just generally want to fall in the right direction, right? And that sort of sums it up, right? If you can just sort of generally fall in the right direction every day, then you're making positive progress, even if you just don't necessarily know where the finish line is or what you're doing through the process. So I think it's a balance there. I do think that there are some things that people should be aware of, that will help them make the process and the journey easier, and have it be less volatile, and for slightly less thrashing, through the process. But I do think ultimately this comes down to a very small team of people saying, my goodness, we're just going to find a way to figure this out. And it's probably going to be sort of ugly along the way. And we're going to get way more wrong than we get right, but we're just not going to give up.
That's a really good synopsis. I do think there's a balance between, yes, we're going to be the champion for our vision. We're going to be relentless in making sure that it's fully implemented. However, we don't turn our ears and our eyes off. We've surrounded ourselves with capable people, and we want to be able to listen, but we don't give up our authority level in making decisions. But if we surround ourselves with the right people, and that's kind of the trick. The old saying is, if you're the smartest person on your team, you need a new team. Or either.
I think startup teams, and this is probably true for nonprofits as well, look very much like, and I don't like the war, violence sort of connotation, but it's the clearest one to connect the dots. It is, they look like a team of Navy SEALs, right? Mm-hmm. Highly capable, highly expertise off the charts. But one of the things in a team of Navy SEALs that is amazing is leadership switches, right, based upon the context of the situation and the problem at hand. So the guy who's the communication expert on the Navy SEAL team is going to take the lead at a different point than someone who's the munitions expert, right? And they switch out leadership based upon the demands of the situation and in a moment in time. And that's power, because that means everybody's in it together. That means everybody's checked their ego at the door. That means that the mission matters more than any individual team member's role and the role that they play. And the startup teams and teams of any construct that have that mentality and are made up of people with that level of skill, but supported by that mentality, are really hard to beat in the end.
That's a critical area. And our discipline that I write about is transformational leadership, which you just described. And transformational leadership was defined by two authors in the 80s, and the military was one of the models. You don't micromanage people in combat. It's a highly trained, skilled team. Now, I use the analogy of an orchestra. You don't try to fix things in rehearsal, but sometimes unexpected things happen. But you've created this culture, but it's not about the conductor, it's not about the performers, it's about the music. And just it's about the mission. You have a very tactical mission, you have an objective, you have tactics, and that's really a good business model. You've got to really have a clear vision for where you're going, how you're going to get there. Plus, you got to have the skill set and the alignment with your people, and you got to have the fortitude to follow through with it, because it is not going to be like what you expect. We have this fantasy view of people that are successful. They just popped out and they were successful, and that's I've never seen that happen. I think it's hard. I remember seeing Van Cliburn, who was one of the early performers in the 60s, 70s, that became nationally noted for a piano performer. And I remember saying one day, boy, he makes it look easy. And my piano teacher said, that's because he's rehearsed a lot and he's mastered it. If it looked hard, he wasn't prepared. So that it's exactly about what you're talking about. It's about getting the core team, but it's also about developing the skill set to lead that team, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. And I think, the New England Patriots, I think, are a great story. No one, I don't think, would say, outside of maybe Tom Brady, a quarterback, that they had the best skill, right? There were teams with much greater skill, better players across the board than the Patriots, but no one was as disciplined and no one prepares to the level that the Patriots prepare, right? So skill is certainly a component, but if you've got innate skill and then you're less prepared, you're probably not going to be as competitive. And I just think that there's lots of lessons to be learned in looking at successes in other disciplines and other areas from our own, and to say, what lessons and what principles are they applying to be an effective Navy SEAL team, to being an effective NFL football team, and then looking at those fundamental principles and abstracting those and applying those to what we're trying to do. Because I think those principles is where the real meaning is and the real meat is, because it's those principles that allow those organizations to perform at a very high level. And the organizations that don't perform at a high level either are unaware of the principles or they don't act in accordance with the principles, right? And then it comes back to discipline. And I think discipline is a very underappreciated attribute and quality in people and in organizations. The universe honors discipline. It has to, because discipline calls on you to do what you know needs to be done when it needs to be done, irrespective of how you feel about the task or the issue or the problem. And if you don't, then the universe sees that you're undisciplined, and then it will punish you, right, in respect to that. And I think that most people are undisciplined, and most organizations are therefore undisciplined. And there's an easy way to know this. When I give this talk at conferences, one of the things that I do is I poll the audience and I say, okay, does everybody agree that the two fundamental things to being relatively healthy and fit is you eat relatively good food in reasonable proportions and you get a reasonable amount of strenuous exercise? Does everybody agree those are the two fundamental principles to being fit and healthy? The audience says yes. I then say, okay, how many of you here are then as fit and healthy as you want to be? And 1% of the people, stand up. And there's typically a triathlete in the room, et cetera. But that means that on some very basic, important thing to us as humans, we know what the fundamental two principles are, yet we are undisciplined in the execution of those fundamentals, even though it's incredibly important to our lives to be relatively fit and healthy. So I think it's impossible to accomplish anything meaningful if you are undisciplined as a leader, or if your team and your organization is undisciplined as a whole.
And that's so wise. You look at the best musical ensembles in the world, they rehearse for every performance, and they're extremely disciplined. Drama groups, sports figures, athletes, there's consistency throughout any kind of performance art. You've got to be disciplined.
Right, but then why do we? So Hugh, let me ask you this. So if we know that's true in sports, and we know that's true in performing arts, and we know that it's true in the military, then why do we not expect and hold ourselves to the same standard in business?
Because we've been taught leadership wrong, and we're the boss, which is double SOB backwards. We bark at people, tell them what to do, rather than building the energy around what our leadership is. And you refer to this in different words. What you get, what they see is what you get. The culture is a reflection of your leadership. And so the orchestra is going to play badly if I conduct badly. If I don't rehearse, we're not disciplined. So we have not learned leadership correctly, and we've inherited broken systems, especially when people hear the word nonprofit, they put on the stupid hat. We scale back and we think scarcity when we really should be thinking abundance, because the word nonprofit is fundamentally a lie. It's a tax exempt business that has a lot of rules, to comply with IRS, which is good. But we must learn the rules, but we also need to learn the rules of engagement. And you highlighted something that's fundamental in our teaching. People in their planning, if they do planning, start with some core values, which become useless because they're static words until you take them and put them into implementable guiding principles. And for you to hammer so hard on principles, made me so happy. That is the anchor that defines your culture and defines your standard of excellence. So that's a missing link, I think, in a lot of organizations. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you don't, if you don't have some guiding principles, and if you're not intentional about those principles, then you don't know what to be disciplined around, right? And I think that it all has to work in concert. But I think if people don't value, for instance, I'll stick to the fit and healthy narrative. If you don't value being fit and healthy, then all talk about diets and eating well and exercising is really hollow and shallow, because you actually don't value being fit and healthy. So you're not going to then act in a disciplined way, because you actually don't value it, and you don't think that it's that important, even though you might say it, you don't really believe it down deep. And I think that's where intention and discipline are inexorably linked, because to be disciplined, you have to know what you value and what you intend to have as an outcome, and then you can be disciplined around that intention. Most people are not intentional, therefore they're not disciplined.
You're right. You're so right. We got about 8 minutes left. Sheikh Ahmed or Jeffrey or Mark, do any of you have a question?
Yeah, I if we don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very, very much for your presentation. You've encapsulated a lot of 40 years of my experience as a quote unquote founder of 4 organizations. And I truly appreciate everything you said, and also your contributions to that. What I find is, well, there are a couple of thoughts. There are a couple of thoughts that go through my mind if I can just take a minute. One is that a lot of people give a lot of our work. Well, let me explain. We do international work, Legacy International. We work all over the world, and mostly on grants from the United States Department of State and some philanthropies. But we also have an initiative called Global Transformation Corps, which is similar to what you was doing also, which is working with young entrepreneurs and startups, et cetera. And finding all the things that you said are absolutely true and very important for people to understand from the point of view that a founders not necessarily have a tactical knowledge and et cetera. What I have found, and I've been very blessed with, is that I used to call it, I was a hands-off manager, and then I realized that the truth was more all hands managing. And so, I've been blessed with a really good team of people for 40 years, and some new millennials have entered into the work in the last 10 years, and we've been finding a great deal of quote unquote success all over the world. And there are a lot of people training trainers and training nonprofits and all of that, and that's great. It's terrific. But I haven't heard very many people talk about access. For example, on your bio, you're an angel investor, but nobody talks about how access to angel investors. It's true. It's the story. It's the narrative. It's how you tell your story and all that. But how do you get access to, first question is, how do you get access to tell that story? I mean, we have 40 years of success. That's pretty good for a nonprofit and for a global organization like ours, a small global organization that's run over the years by 10 to 20 people. Right now it's 16 people. So I'll stop there. I had some other comment, but I don't want to take up all the 9 minutes.
Yeah, I think that and I think there's a deeper, issue here around awareness and access. Because I think skills training is the great equalizer and the great democratizer, right? Because if you have a monetizable skill, then your socioeconomic status is in trajectory is going to be changed potentially for a lifetime and maybe generationally. And I think one of the challenges that people have is how do they get awareness and then access to skills training to get, a skill that can be monetized meaningfully. And then if you think about, if you want to start a company or, if you want to start a nonprofit, how do you get access to the people? How do you even have awareness of what the right questions are? And then how do you get access to the people, right, to ask the questions of, or to, get investment from, et cetera. And I think it comes back to it being intentional in that, most of the people, frankly, that contact me about investing or that contact other people about potentially investing, they spend very little time, if any time, actually looking at the kind of companies I've been involved in and, what I'm involved in now and what I care about, and then taking their narrative and taking their story and having that story align with who I am, or if there isn't a fit at all, realizing that there isn't a fit and just moving on. And so I think that there's a complete lack of targeting by most startups looking for investment, of approaching the wrong people with the wrong message. And it's just so seeking investment and seeking funding as a nonprofit is a sales endeavor, just like any other sales endeavor. I wouldn't call a prospect, right, a potential customer for a company of mine and a product, if I didn't have it, some sense and hadn't done some legwork on what they might be interested in and what the profile of the company is, et cetera. But by and large, most people reach out, cold to investors and to funders, and they're hoping that it's a lightning strike is going to happen, versus actually doing some homework and then creating a narrative and a story that resonates with that specific funder and that specific investor. One of the things I see happening all the time with startups is they create, a single pitch deck. They create a story narrative and a story arc, and then they use that, over and over and over again with everybody that they talk to. And they need to have that base story arc for sure, but then they need to modify it and they need to align it with a particular investor, because they're then not, their pitch and their story is genericized to the point of probably being ineffective for most people that they tell the story to.
So those are really good words. We want to be it's like the art of war. You talked about the military, the art of war. You know your enemy. You need to know your donor. You need to know and really a donor is an investor. They're investing not
Absolutely.
not on ROI, but ROL, return on life. And they want to see positive impact and positive results. So this is so helpful, Ryan. We thank you for your comments, folks. And we're on the tail end of this. This hour went by very fast, like it always does. And thank you for your good comments. I'm going to talk about the community again for just a minute, and then I'm going to come back to you and ask you for a challenge or a parting thought or tip that you want to give people, that, or say something that you didn't have a chance to say. And if you're one of those people out there that are working too hard, you're all by yourself, you feel like you want to give up, you feel like there's something missing, connect with a group of your peers, connect with a group of experts. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of things to learn, but really it's the support of what do I do now? What do I do next? How do I embrace all of these things that our guest talked about today? He doesn't know, but we resonate on just about everything he talked about today. And we have a program within the community for you to work on yourself, because really we need to work on ourselves like Jim Rohn used to say, work on yourself harder than you work on your business. And by the way, we are running a nonprofit that is a tax exempt business. And so if you're frustrated and uncertain about what you're faced with, the solution is here. It's the Center Vision community. Go to nonprofitcommunity.org. So Ryan, thank you for such great stuff today. What do you want to leave people with?
I think I'll dovetail off of one of your comments talking about the community is, be as self-aware as you can possibly be. Understand what makes you tick, understand why you make the decisions that you make, what gets you emotional, right? Because I think it's impossible to be an effective leader. I think it's impossible to solve a problem in a way that stakeholders care about if you don't first understand yourself and you're able to manage yourself and know how you tick. And so I think that that's a good place to start. That's a good place to start. And I would say it's a work in progress for all of us, but I would say we can all be more self-aware. And I think the more self-aware we are, then we're better leaders and we're better able to solve problems for others and serve others.
Love it. Really good, wise words. A good place to start, but don't ever stop. So Ryan Frederick, thank you so much. And his book you can find on Amazon. And what's the title of the book?
The Founder's Manual.
The Founder's Manual. And I'm going to get my book today. So it's something everybody needs to have. Ryan, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Hugh, thanks for having me.